The orc woman's hands had stopped bleeding weeks ago, but the calluses that replaced the raw skin were so thick now that she could barely feel the grain of the wood as she scrubbed the inn's floors for the third time that day. Zara Vex had not always been numb to the world, though sometimes she struggled to remember what feeling anything beyond exhaustion had been like. The crossroads station sat at the junction of three trade routes in the borderlands, a squat building of weathered timber and stone that served as inn, tavern, and supply depot for travelers moving between the scattered frontier settlements. She had been indentured here for 4 years now, bound by a contract she had signed in desperation after her family's farm collapsed under debt. A contract that somehow never seemed to run down no matter how many hours she worked or how many coins the master claimed to deduct from what she owed. The original sum had been 60 silver marks. She had asked once 6 months ago how much remained. Master Grendrick had consulted his ledger with theatrical slowness and announced 140. When she protested, when she said that made no sense, he had explained in the patient tone one might use with a slow child that her room, her food, the candles she burned, the water she used, the very air she breathed under his roof all carried costs, and surely she did not expect him to feed and house an orc out of charity. The other workers, all human, paid far less for their keep, but what was she going to do about it? Where would she go? The constable in the nearest real town was Grendrick's cousin. So Zara scrubbed floors and hauled water and mucked stables and served drinks to travelers who sometimes met her eyes with curiosity, sometimes with contempt, and most often not at all. She had learned to make herself small despite standing 5 feet and 9 inches tall, had learned to keep her tusks hidden behind closed lips, had learned that the best way to survive was to expect nothing and want nothing, because wanting things only carved out hollow spaces inside you that ached. The veterinarian arrived on a cold afternoon in early autumn when the leaves were just beginning to turn, and the air carried the threat of the winter to come. Zara was in the stable yard, trying to calm a merchant's draft horse that had thrown a shoe and gashed its foreleg in the process. The merchant himself stood to one side, arms crossed, complaining loudly about the delay while the horse, a massive gray gelding, rolled its eyes and stamped in pain and fear. She had cleaned the wound as best she could, but the animal needed proper care, and the nearest farrier was 2 days' ride away. "Easy now," she murmured to the horse, keeping her voice low and steady the way her father had taught her when she was small and the world still made sense. "Easy, friend. I know it hurts." The horse settled slightly at her tone, ears flicking toward her, but it was still too agitated for her to get a proper bandage on the leg. She was trying to decide whether to risk asking Grendrick for the coin to purchase the willow bark and comfrey from the herb woman, who occasionally passed through, when she heard a new voice from the stable entrance. "Let me help." The man who stepped into the yard was perhaps 35, lean and rangy in the way of people who spent their lives moving from place to place. He wore a canvas coat over a work shirt and trousers that had seen better days, and carried a worn leather satchel over one shoulder. His hair was dark brown, shot through with early gray at the temples, and his face had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors in all seasons. But it was his eyes that caught Zara's attention, pale gray-green, calm and assessing as he looked at the injured horse. "I am a veterinarian," he continued, moving forward slowly so as not to startle the animal. "I was passing through and heard the commotion. May I?" The merchant grunted permission, clearly caring only that someone dealt with his property, and the veterinarian set down his satchel and approached the horse with the kind of quiet confidence that made even frightened animals pause. Zara found herself stepping back automatically, ceding space to someone with real authority, but the man glanced at her and shook his head slightly. "You have him calmer than he has been all day, I would wager," he said. "Keep talking to him while I examine the leg. What is his name?" "I do not know," Zara admitted, surprised at being addressed as though her opinion mattered. The merchant supplied it grudgingly. "Stonehoof." "Stonehoof," the veterinarian repeated, pitching his voice for the horse's ears. "Let us see what trouble you have gotten into." He worked with an economy of movement that spoke of long practice, his hands gentle but sure as he examined the injury. Zara kept murmuring to the horse, and between the two of them, the gelding settled enough for the veterinarian to clean the wound more thoroughly and apply a poultice that smelled of herbs and something else she could not identify. "The shoe can wait until you reach the next town," he told the merchant, "but change this dressing tonight and again in the morning. The cut is not deep, but infection is always a risk. Here." He handed over a small cloth bundle. "Enough for 3 days, that should see you through." The merchant grumbled about the cost, paid a few coins, and led his horse away. The veterinarian watched them go, then turned to Zara with a slight smile. "You have a good hand with animals," he said. "My father kept livestock," she replied, then wondered why she was offering personal information to a stranger. "Before." He nodded as though that explained everything, which perhaps it did. Many people in the borderlands had a before that they did not discuss. He was studying her now, not with the calculating look men sometimes got when they saw a young woman alone, but with a different kind of assessment, clinical and concerned. "You work here?" he asked. "Yes, by choice." The question was so unexpected that Zara felt something crack in the careful blankness she maintained. "Does anyone choose to work at the crossroads? Indenture?" She hesitated, then nodded. There was no shame in it, she told herself. Half the frontier had signed away years of their lives to creditors at one point or another. That it was her own foolish hope that had put the pen in her hand changed nothing. The veterinarian's expression shifted into something harder. "How long do you still owe?" "I do not know," Zara said, and heard the exhaustion in her own voice. "It keeps growing." She expected him to nod and move on the way everyone did, because what business was it of his if some orc girl was trapped in an exploitative contract? Instead, he was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to her hands, which bore the marks of years of hard labor, to the stable around them, taking in details she could not guess at. Then he said, very quietly, "You deserve a better life." Zara stared at him. The words made no sense. They were sounds without meaning, a language she had once known but forgotten. When she finally found her voice, it came out harsh. "You do not know anything about me. I know you are good with animals, which means you are patient and observant. I know you are still here, which means you are strong. And I know that whatever brought you to this place, you deserve better than being worked to the bone by a man who cheats you." "I signed the contract," she said flatly. "It is legal. Legal and right are not always the same thing." He reached into his coat and pulled out a card which he offered to her. She took it automatically. The letters were neatly printed. Byron Ashford, veterinary surgeon, circuit practice. "I come through the crossroads every 6 weeks or so," Byron Ashford said. "My route covers most of the settlements and farms within 3 days' ride. If you ever need anything, or if you just want to talk, I am usually here for at least a night." Zara looked down at the card, at the letters that swam slightly because she had learned to read only haltingly, and her eyes were unaccountably burning. "Why?" "Because someone should have said it to you a long time ago." He picked up his satchel and settled it on his shoulder. "And because I am not fond of men who exploit people who have no other options." Then he walked away, leaving Zara standing in the stable yard with a small rectangle of paper in her scarred hands, and a feeling rising in her chest that she had not experienced in so long she almost did not recognize it. It might have been anger. It might have been hope. She crushed it down ruthlessly, because hope was the most dangerous thing in the world, the thing that got you hurt worse than any blow. Byron Ashford was a stranger who would forget about her before he reached the next town. His words were empty kindness, the sort people offered when it cost them nothing. She would not be fool enough to believe them. She tucked the card into her pocket anyway. The weeks that followed were the same as all the weeks before them. Wake before dawn, haul water from the well, start the kitchen fires, cook breakfast for whatever travelers had stayed the night, serve, clean, scrub, mend, haul more water. Cook again, serve again, clean again. Fall into her narrow bed in the attic room she shared with two other women, sleep the black, dreamless sleep of exhaustion, wake and begin again. Grendrick was in a foul mood more often than not, finding fault with everything Zara did and assigning extra tasks as punishment. Once he struck her across the face for serving a guest's ale a moment too slowly, and she took the blow in silence because fighting back would only make things worse. The other workers kept their distance. The cook, a dour woman named Marna, was not unkind but had long ago learned not to make trouble for herself by befriending an orc. The two serving girls, both young and skittish, avoided Zara except when work required them to speak. The stable hand, an older man called Peric, sometimes offered her a nod of acknowledgement but nothing more. They were all trapped in their own ways, and there was a kind of etiquette to servitude. You did not ask about each other's pasts. You did not draw attention, you survived. Zara told herself she had forgotten about the veterinarian and his strange words. She was mostly successful, except at night when the darkness made it harder to control her thoughts, and she would find her hand straying to the pocket where she kept his card, her fingers tracing the raised letters she could not see. You deserve a better life. She did not believe it. But some part of her, some stubborn fragment that had not yet been ground to dust, wanted to. When Byron Ashford returned 6 weeks later, Zara was in the chicken coop, dealing with a hen that had become egg-bound. She had her sleeve rolled up and was trying to gently manipulate the egg into a better position while the hen squawked indignant protests, and the other chickens milled about in sympathetic agitation. It was delicate work, and she was so focused that she did not hear the footsteps behind her until Byron spoke. Egg-bound, she jumped, nearly dropping the hen, and turned to find him leaning against the coop's doorway with that same calm, assessing look. He was dressed much as before, though his coat was dustier from the road. Yes, she managed. The egg is sideways, I think. I am trying to turn it, but she will not hold still. May I? Zara hesitated, then carefully passed him the chicken. Byron took the bird with the ease of long practice, tucking her against his side in a way that immobilized her wings while leaving her body accessible. His hands were deft and gentle as he examined the hen. You were right, he said. Sideways presentation. Hold her like this. He demonstrated the grip, then handed the chicken back. Now, with your other hand, very gently from the outside, feel for the curve of the shell. There. Can you feel it? Zara nodded, her fingers finding the hard roundness beneath the hen's vent. Good. Now press very lightly upward and to the left. Not forcing it, just suggesting the direction you want it to go. The muscles will do most of the work if you can get the angle right. She did as he instructed, and after a moment she felt the egg shift. The hen gave a surprised cluck, and then with a final push, the egg slid free into Zara's waiting hand. She set the hen down quickly, and the bird stalked off with ruffled dignity to rejoin her sisters. Well done, Byron said, and the approval in his voice sent an unfamiliar warmth through Zara's chest. "You taught me," she pointed out. "I showed you once. You did the work." He glanced around the coop, taking in the clean straw, the full water dishes, the neat arrangement of nesting boxes. "You keep things well here. Master Grendrick insists on it. I am sure he does." Byron's tone was dry. "Is he the one who gave you that bruise?" Zara's hand went automatically to her cheek, where the mark from a week ago had faded to a yellowish green. "I was clumsy." "I doubt that very much." Byron was quiet for a moment, and she could feel him weighing his words. "How much do you know about animal care? Not just chickens and horses, but the real work of it. Diagnosis, treatment, surgery." "Only what I learned on my family's farm. We could not afford a veterinarian often, so we did what we could ourselves." "Would you like to learn more?" Zara looked at him sharply, trying to read his intention. "Why would you teach me?" "Because you have the aptitude for it, and because I could use an assistant when I am in this area." He held up a hand before she could protest. "I know you are contracted here, but Grendrick cannot object to you helping me with animals when I visit, especially if it means better care for his livestock and any traveler's beasts that need attention. It would reflect well on the station." "He will not see it that way." "Then we will make sure he does." Byron smiled slightly. "I can be very persuasive when I need to be, and I am willing to pay the station for your time, which will appeal to his business sense if nothing else." It was a mad idea. Zara could think of a dozen ways it could go wrong. A dozen reasons Grendrick would refuse or, worse, agree and then punish her for it later in one of the small, petty ways he specialized in. But Byron was looking at her with those steady gray-green eyes, and she found herself saying, "If he allows it, yes. I would like to learn." "Good." Byron's smile widened. "I will speak with him before I leave. In the meantime, do you have any animals here that need attention?" "I should earn my keep while I negotiate." As it turned out, there were several. One of the cart horses had developed a cough that worried Peric, a barn cat had torn its ear in a fight, and a traveler's dog had picked up a thorn in its paw that had become infected. Byron tended to each with Zara watching, and in watching she began to learn. He did not lecture or condescend. Instead, he explained what he was doing as he did it, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. "See how the horse's nostrils flare when he breathes, and listen to the sound, that wet rattle. It is not just irritation from dust. There is fluid in the lungs, so we need an expectorant, something to help him cough it up. I use a mix of alecampane root and horehound, steeped in hot water and mixed with honey to make it palatable." For the cat, he showed her how to clean a wound properly, how to trim away the damaged tissue without causing unnecessary pain, how to apply a salve that would prevent infection. "Most animals will heal themselves if you just keep the wound clean and give them time," he said. "Our job is mostly to help nature along and prevent complications." The dog was more challenging because the infection had spread, the paw hot and swollen. Byron lanced the abscess with a small, sharp blade, and Zara held the dog while he drained the pus and flushed the wound. The animal whimpered but did not snap, seeming to understand they were trying to help. "There," Byron said when it was done, bandaging the paw with strips of clean cloth. 3 days of rest and regular cleaning and he will be fine. Make sure the owner understands that the bandage must be changed daily." Zara relayed the instructions to the traveler, a merchant who nodded impatiently and counted out coins into Byron's hand. When the man had gone, Byron looked at the coins, then held out half of them to Zara. "Your share," he said. She stared at the silver in his palm. "I did not do anything. You held the dog, you kept him calm. That is half the work." When she did not move to take the coins, Byron reached out and gently took her hand, pressing the silver into it and folding her fingers closed. "You earned it, Zara. Do not refuse what you have earned." The coins were warm from his skin. Zara looked down at them, at her own scarred fingers closed around them, and felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest again. Not hope, she told herself, just surprise. "I will speak with Grendrick now," Byron said. "Wait here." He was gone for perhaps 20 minutes. Zara stayed in the stable, mucking out stalls to keep her hands busy while her mind raced. She had no illusions about how the conversation would go. Grendrick would refuse, or he would demand an exorbitant fee, or he would agree and then make her life miserable in ways Byron would never see. That was how the world worked. That was how her life worked. When Byron emerged from the inn, his expression was unreadable. Zara braced herself for disappointment. "He has agreed," Byron said. "For a fee of 2 silver per visit, you may assist me with any animal work I do while I am at the crossroads. The fee will be paid to him directly and, he assures me, deducted from your debt." Zara's throat went tight. He agreed. "I may have implied that the constable in Milford has been concerned about the quality of animal care at way stations along the trade routes, and that my reports carry some weight in that regard." Byron's expression was bland. "I may also have mentioned that I know several other veterinarians who use this route, and that we do talk amongst ourselves about which establishments provide good service and which do not." "You lied." "I suggested. There is a difference." Byron's eyes met hers. "He is a bully and a cheat, Zara. I have no compunction about using what leverage I have to help you. Do you object?" She should. She should tell him that she did not need his help, that she could take care of herself, that his interference would only make things harder in the long run. Instead, she heard herself say, "No. I do not object." "Good. Then I will see you in 6 weeks. In the meantime, practice what I showed you today. Observation is the foundation of everything else." He left the next morning, and Zara stood in the stable yard and watched him ride away on a sturdy brown mare, his satchel tied behind the saddle. She waited until he was out of sight before she went back to work, and if her step was a little lighter than usual, if she caught herself almost humming as she hauled water from the well, she told herself it meant nothing at all. The silver coins Byron had given her, she hid in a crack in the attic floorboards beneath her bed. It was foolish to keep them, she knew. She should give them to Grendrick, have them deducted from her debt, but she could not bring herself to do it. They were proof that someone had looked at her work and deemed it worth paying for. They were proof that she was more than just a pair of hands to scrub floors and haul water. They were proof that Byron Ashford had been real, and not just a dream she had conjured in her desperation. 6 weeks felt like an eternity, and no time at all. Zara found herself watching the road more than she should, anticipating Byron's return, even as she told herself not to be foolish. He was a circuit veterinarian, with dozens of stops to make and far more important things to do than spend time teaching an indentured orc woman, a trade she would never be allowed to practice. He had been kind once, twice, but kindness from strangers did not last. It could not, because if it did, if people could genuinely care about someone they barely knew, then the world was a far more painful place than Zara had allowed herself to believe. But when Byron returned, riding into the crossroads on a gray afternoon with rain threatening in the clouds overhead, the smile he gave her when he saw her in the stable yard was warm and genuine and entirely uncomplicated. "Zara," he said, dismounting, "how are you?" "Well enough," she said, taking his mare's reins. "You, tired? It has been a long circuit this time." He stretched, rolling his shoulders. I have been looking forward to a hot meal and a bed that does not move, but first, do we have any patience?" They did. A farmer from a nearby homestead had brought in a cow with a prolapsed uterus, a messy and urgent problem. Zara had helped with such things before, but only in the crudest way. Byron approached it with the calm competence she was beginning to recognize as his hallmark, explaining the procedure as he worked. "The key is to keep everything clean and get the uterus back into position before infection sets in," he said, washing his hands and arms thoroughly before even approaching the distressed animal. "Zara, I need you to hold her head and keep her as calm as possible. This is going to be uncomfortable for her, and if she thrashes, we could do more harm than good." Zara stationed herself at the cow's head, stroking the broad forehead and murmuring nonsense in the low, soothing voice that animals seem to respond to. The cow rolled her eyes and lowed plaintively, but she did not fight as Byron carefully cleaned and examined the prolapsed tissue. "It is not as bad as it could be," he said. "No necrosis yet, which is good. Hand me that bucket of warm water and then the sugar." "Sugar," Zara echoed, even as she passed him the items. "It reduces swelling, makes the tissue easier to manipulate back into place." Byron demonstrated, sprinkling a generous amount of sugar over the exposed uterus and then waiting as the tissue visibly shrank. An old trick, but it works. Now comes the difficult part. He worked for the better part of an hour, patient and methodical, gently easing the uterus back into the cow's body while Zara kept the animal as still as she could. When it was finally done, Byron sat back on his heels, his arms bloody to the elbows despite the washing, and let out a long breath. "There. She should recover fully if she is kept quiet and watched for signs of infection. No breeding for at least a season, though, or the problem will recur." The farmer, who had been watching anxiously from the stable door, nodded fervent agreement and paid Byron a sum that made Zara blink. When the man had led his cow away, Byron divided the coins as he had before, handing half to Zara without comment. "I cannot keep taking your money," she said. "It is not my money. It is payment for the work done, and you did half the work." Byron was washing his arms in a bucket of clean water, scrubbing away the blood and fluids. "If you are worried about the morality of it, consider that I am paying you for an apprenticeship. Most apprentices pay their masters for the privilege of learning. I am simply inverting the arrangement. Most apprentices are free to use what they learn." The words came out more bitterly than Zara had intended, and she saw Byron pause, his hands stilling in the water. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "You will not be indentured forever." "Will I not?" Zara looked down at the coins in her hand. "My debt grows faster than I can work it off. Even with the silver I earn helping you, it is not enough. I will die here, Byron. I will grow old scrubbing Grendrick's floors, and when I am too weak to work any more, he will cast me out with nothing." She did not know why she was saying these things, why she was giving voice to the thoughts she barely allowed herself to think. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of the day, or the strange intimacy of working side by side with someone who treated her as though she mattered. Perhaps it was simply that Byron listened without judgment, his gray-green eyes steady on hers. "No," he said finally. "You will not die here. I will not allow it. You cannot stop it. Perhaps not alone." Byron dried his hands on a rag and then came to stand in front of her. He was taller than she was, but not by much, and when he looked at her, it was almost at eye level. "But I am not alone. I know people, Zara. I know farmers who need skilled hands, magistrates who dislike cheats, merchants who owe me favors. And I know you, and I know that you are worth fighting for, even if you do not believe it yet." Zara felt her throat close. "Why do you care?" The question seemed to hit Byron harder than she had expected. She saw something flicker across his face, something old and painful before he looked away. When he spoke again, his voice was low. I knew someone once. A boy, indentured to a master smith in the city where I trained. The smith was cruel, and the boy was too proud to ask for help. I saw the bruises, heard the rumors, but I did nothing. I told myself it was not my business, that I did not have the standing to interfere. And then one day the boy did not come to the market where we sometimes talked, and he never came again. He stopped, his jaw tight. Zara waited, barely breathing. I learned later that he had tried to run, and the smith had caught him. The beating he received for it killed him. He was 14 years old, and he died because no one cared enough to help him. Byron's hands had curled into fists at his sides. I swore then that I would never walk past someone in need again. I would never let my fear or my convenience matter more than someone's life. So that is why I care, Zara, because I failed once, and I will not fail again. The silence that followed was heavy with shared pain, with the weight of old ghosts. Zara reached out slowly and touched Byron's hand, uncurling his fingers with her own. I am not that boy, she said quietly. And what happened to him was not your fault. I know that in my head. Byron's fingers tightened around hers, but my heart has never quite believed it. They stood like that for a moment, hands clasped in the dimming light of the stable, and Zara felt something shift between them, some barrier dissolving. She had thought Byron's kindness was just that, simple kindness, but it was more complicated than she had realized. It was driven by guilt and old wounds, by a need to atone that had nothing to do with her, and everything to do with a dead boy she had never known. She should pull away. She should protect herself from the disappointment that would come when Byron's guilt was satisfied, and he moved on to the next person who needed saving. But his hand was warm in hers, and the stable was quiet around them, and for just a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to matter to someone not because of what she represented, but because of who she was. Then, the moment passed. Byron released her hand and stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. It is getting late, and I still need to stable my horse and find dinner. Will you be at breakfast tomorrow? I thought we might discuss some of the common illnesses you are likely to see in livestock. Building on what you already know. Yes, Zara said, her voice only slightly unsteady. I will be there. Good. Byron smiled, but it was a smaller, more guarded thing than his earlier smiles. Get some rest, Zara, you have earned it. She watched him lead his mare into the stable, and then she made herself turn and walk back to the inn, her mind churning with everything that had been said and everything that had not. That night, lying in her narrow bed while the other women snored around her, she added the new coins to her small, hidden hoard and tried not to think about the warmth of Byron's hand in hers, or the way he had said her name like it mattered. She failed, of course. But she was becoming accustomed to failure. The pattern established itself over the following months. Every 6 weeks, Byron would arrive at the crossroads, and for the day or two that he stayed, Zara would become his assistant. He taught her how to recognize the signs of colic in horses, how to lance an abscess, how to stitch a wound so that it healed cleanly. He showed her which herbs could be used for what ailments, how to compound a poultice, how to prepare a tincture. He explained the principles of bloodletting, though he admitted he used it sparingly, preferring other methods when possible. The old ways are not always the best ways, he said once, as they walked the perimeter of a pasture, checking a farmer's small herd for signs of hoof rot. Medicine is changing. We are learning that many things we thought we knew are wrong. The key is to observe, to question, and to always put the welfare of the animal first. Zara absorbed it all hungrily. For the first time in years, Her mind had something to work on besides survival. She began to see the world differently, to notice details she had previously overlooked. The way a chicken held its wing could indicate injury or illness. The texture of a cow's coat could reveal nutritional deficiencies. The smell of a wound could tell you whether infection was setting in. And slowly, so slowly she almost did not notice it happening, she began to take pride in her work. When a traveler's horse threw a shoe, and she was able to identify the early signs of thrush and treat it before Byron even arrived, she felt a warm glow of accomplishment. When the barn cat that Byron had treated months before brought her new litter of kittens to show Zara, as though recognizing her as a source of safety, she felt something perilously close to joy. Byron noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "You are smiling more," he remarked one afternoon as they worked together to treat a goat with a severe case of bloat. "It suits you." Zara ducked her head, suddenly self-conscious. "I have reason to smile. I am learning something useful." "You are learning something you are good at," Byron corrected. "There is a difference. Plenty of people learn useful skills and remain miserable. You have found something that fits you." She wanted to deny it, to maintain the careful distance she had always kept between herself and anything that could hurt her, but the truth was that Byron was right. She loved this work. She loved the problem-solving aspect of it, the way you had to be patient and observant and willing to adapt. She loved the animals themselves, the way they trusted you if you were calm and competent. She even loved the messiness of it, the blood and fluids and difficult births, because it all mattered. Every creature they treated was a life saved, a suffering eased, and that meant something in a way that scrubbing floors never had. "What will you do when your indenture is up?" Byron asked, and Zara's fragile happiness cracked. "If it is ever up," she said flatly. Byron frowned. "How much do you owe now?" "I do not know. Grendrick stopped telling me. Then we should ask him." "No." The word came out sharper than Zara intended. "It will only make things worse." "How can asking a simple question make things worse?" "Because Grendrick does not like questions." "Because he will punish me for bothering him. Because that is how it works here, Byron." Zara realized her voice was rising and forced herself to calm down. "Please, just leave it alone." Byron looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have stopped him. He nodded slowly. "All right. For now. But Zara, if he is cheating you, there are legal avenues we can pursue. Indenture contracts are required to be fair and transparent. If he is inflating your debt illegally, that is grounds for voiding the contract entirely." "And who would believe an orc woman over a respected innkeeper?" Zara shook her head. "I appreciate what you are trying to do, but you do not understand how things work for people like me." "Then explain it to me." So she did. She told him about the way human laws were enforced differently depending on who you were. How an orc's word was always suspect. How the constable was Grendrick's cousin, and the magistrate a drinking companion. She told him about the other indentured workers she had known who had tried to fight their contracts and ended up with their terms extended for the trouble, or worse, accused of theft or assault, and thrown into debtor's prison. She told him about the systematic way that people like Grendrick kept people like her trapped, not through one big injustice but through 1,000 small ones, each too minor to fight, but together forming walls as strong as any prison. Byron listened without interrupting, and when she was finished, he was quiet for a long time. The goat they had been treating had wandered off, its bloat relieved, and they were alone in the pasture under a sky that was deepening toward evening. "I am sorry," he said finally. "Not just for what you have endured, but for my ignorance. You are right. I do not understand what it is like to live in a world that is rigged against me from the start. But I want to help, Zara. Not because of my guilt or my need to atone, but because you matter. As a person, as a skilled healer, as someone who deserves better than what she has been given, please let me try." Zara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "I do not want to be your redemption, Byron. You are not." He took a step closer, his voice gentle. "You are my friend. And friends help each other. Friends." The word hung in the air between them, fraught with meaning. Zara tested it in her mind, turning it over like an unfamiliar object. Did she have a friend? Could someone like her, trapped and powerless, claim friendship with someone like him, free and respected? It seemed impossible, a category error, and yet Byron was looking at her with such sincerity that she found herself wanting to believe him. "All right," she said slowly. "We are friends. But that means you have to respect my choices, Byron, even when you disagree with them. Even when you think you know better. I can do that." Byron held out his hand, and after a moment Zara shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and he smiled at her with such open affection that she felt her chest tighten. "Friends." The word felt strange in her mouth when she repeated it, but not unpleasant. Friends. That night, Grendrick found fault with the way Zara had cleaned the guest rooms and docked a week's worth of credit from her account. When she asked what she had done wrong, he told her the sheets were not folded properly, a complaint so petty and vague that it was impossible to address. She went to bed angry and frustrated, and the coins hidden under her floorboards felt like a mockery, a handful of silver against a debt that would never be paid. But the next morning, Byron was at breakfast, and when he saw her, he smiled and asked if she was ready to learn about treating colic, and for a little while the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. The seasons turned. Autumn gave way to winter, and the crossroads became a colder, harsher place. Snow piled against the buildings, and the work of hauling water and keeping the fires going became even more grueling. Travelers were fewer, which meant less coin coming in, which made Grendrick even more miserable and short-tempered. He began to skimp on food for the workers, serving them watery stew and hard bread while the guests ate well. Zara's clothes, already worn, developed tears that she mended by candlelight because Grendrick refused to provide new ones. Byron's visits became the bright points in the darkness, the days she looked forward to with an intensity that frightened her. He brought her small gifts sometimes. A better knife for cutting poultices, a pair of gloves lined with wool, a book on animal husbandry that he had found at a market. The book was the most precious thing anyone had ever given her, and she kept it wrapped in oilcloth to protect it, reading it by firelight whenever she had a spare moment. "You should not spend your money on me," she told him when he presented her with the gloves, but her fingers were already curling into the soft wool, savoring the warmth. "I should spend my money however I like," Byron replied, "and I like making sure you do not lose your fingers to frostbite. Skilled hands are valuable, Zara. Take care of them." He was careful, she noticed, to frame his gifts as practical rather than personal, but there was a tenderness in the way he made sure she had what she needed that belied his casual tone. And she, who had learned not to want things, found herself wanting more and more time with him, more conversations, more of the easy camaraderie that had developed between them. It was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. Byron would move on eventually, his guilt satisfied or his interest waned, and she would be left alone again with only the memory of what it had felt like to matter to someone. But she could not seem to stop herself from leaning into the warmth he offered, like a traveler lost in the snow who sees a fire in the distance. She was falling for him. The realization came to her one night as she lay in bed, tracing the memory of that day's interactions like a miser counting coins. The way he laughed at her dry observations about the travelers who passed through. The way he listened when she spoke, as though her thoughts were worth his full attention. The way he stood just a little too close when they worked together, not crowding her but making his presence known. She was falling for him, and it was the most foolish thing she had ever done. Winter deepened, and with it came a harshness that tested everyone. A pack of wolves, driven down from the mountains by hunger, began harassing the local farms, killing livestock and creating panic. Byron was called out repeatedly to tend to injured animals, and Zara went with him when she could, which was not often because Grendrick was less willing to spare her when business was slow. On one of these calls to a farm about an hour's ride from the crossroads, they arrived to find a scene of carnage. 3 sheep lay dead in the snow, their throats torn out, and a 4th was badly wounded, its side laid open by claws or teeth. "We need to put her down," the farmer said, his face grim. "She is suffering." Byron examined the sheep carefully, his expression thoughtful. "The wound is bad, but I have seen worse. If we can stitch her up and prevent infection, she might survive." "It is your choice, of course, but if you are willing to risk the cost of treatment, I am willing to try." The farmer looked at his wife, who nodded. "She is our best ewe. We can spare the coin if there is a chance." "Zara," Byron said, "I will need your help. This is going to be delicate." They worked for hours in the farmer's barn, Byron stitching while Zara held the ewe steady and monitored her breathing. The wound was deep and ragged, and there was a moment when Zara thought they were going to lose her, but Byron's hands never faltered, and slowly, painstakingly, he closed the injury. "There," he said at last, sitting back. "Now we wait and see if infection sets in. Change the bandages twice a day, keep her warm and quiet, and send for me if there is any sign of fever or if the wound starts to smell." The farmer paid them well, and as they rode back to the crossroads through the snowy twilight, Zara felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with the coins in her pocket, and everything to do with the knowledge that they had saved a life together. "You did well today," Byron said, glancing over at her. "Your hands are very steady. You have the temperament for surgery. I had a good teacher. You would have been good at this regardless. It is in you, Zara. The talent, the dedication, the compassion. You were meant to be a healer." Zara looked away, her eyes stinging. "It does not matter what I was meant to be. I am what I am. A servant, an indentured laborer. That is all I will ever be." "No," Byron's voice was sharp, and she looked at him in surprise. He had stopped his horse and was staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "No, Zara, you are more than that. You are more than what Grendrick has made you believe, and I am going to prove it to you. Byron, I have been thinking about this for months. I have been careful, cautious, because I did not want to push too hard and drive you away. But I cannot stand by and watch you suffer anymore. I am going to get you out of that contract." Fear lanced through Zara, sharp and immediate. "You cannot. You will only make things worse." "I will not. I have been talking to people, Zara. I know a magistrate in Milford, a fair man who hates corruption. I know a solicitor who specializes in contract law. If Grendrick is cheating you, we can prove it, and we can have your indenture voided. And if we cannot prove it, if his records are good enough to pass inspection," Zara's voice was rising, "then I will have angered him for nothing, and he will make my life a nightmare, or he will sell my contract to someone worse, or he will have me arrested on some trumped-up charge. You do not understand what you are risking, Byron. This is not your life. You can ride away any time you want. I cannot." Byron flinched as though she had struck him. "You think I would abandon you. I think you would do what you think is right, and damn the consequences. I think you are trying to save me because of a boy who died years ago, and you do not see that I am not him. I do not want to be saved, Byron. I just want to survive. Is that really all you want?" Byron's voice was low and fierce. "To survive. To spend the rest of your life scrubbing floors for a man who treats you like property. You are better than that, Zara. You deserve better than that. There it was again. You deserve better. The words that had haunted her since the first time Byron had spoken them. The words she had tried so hard not to believe because believing them meant acknowledging how much she had lost, how much had been stolen from her. "Stop," she said, her voice breaking. "Stop saying that. Stop telling me I deserve things I can never have. It is cruel, Byron. It is the cruelest thing you could do. It is only cruel if I do not mean it, and I mean it, Zara. Every word." They were both breathing hard now, their horses stamping in the snow. The light was fading fast, and they needed to get back before full dark, but neither of them moved. "I cannot do this," Zara said finally. "I cannot let myself hope and then have it ripped away when it all goes wrong. Please, Byron, I am begging you, let it alone." Byron looked at her for a long moment, his face a map of conflict. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, I will not push." "But Zara, the offer stands. If you change your mind, if you decide you are ready to fight, I will be there. I promise you that." They rode the rest of the way in silence, and when they reached the crossroads, Zara went straight to her room without looking back. That night, she cried for the first time in years, great racking sobs that she muffled in her thin pillow so the other women would not hear. She was falling in love with Byron Ashford, and it was going to destroy her. The weeks after their argument were strained. Byron still came to the crossroads on his circuit, and Zara still assisted him with the animals, but there was a careful distance between them now, a politeness that ached more than anger would have. He did not push her about her indenture, did not bring up the magistrate or the solicitor, but she could see the frustration in the set of his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when Grendrick spoke to her with casual cruelty. For her part, Zara tried to rebuild the walls that Byron had knocked down, to protect herself from the inevitable pain of losing him. But it was like trying to unlearn a language she had already started speaking. She could not stop noticing the way his hands moved when he worked, deft and sure. She could not stop anticipating his arrivals, counting the days until he would ride into the yard. She could not stop wanting more than she could have. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought change. A new magistrate was appointed to the region, a woman named Helena Crane who had a reputation for being incorruptible and fierce. Byron mentioned her casually one visit, and Zara saw the calculation in his eyes, the hope he was trying not to show. "Do not," she said quietly. "I did not say anything. You were thinking it." Byron sighed and set down the hoof pick he had been using. They were in the stable, tending to a horse with an overgrown hoof, and the animal stood patiently between them. "I made you a promise, Zara. I will not break it. But that does not mean I have to like watching you suffer." "I am not suffering," she said, though it was a lie and they both knew it. "You are not thriving either. And before you tell me that survival is enough, let me ask you something. If you could have any life you wanted, what would it look like?" Zara hesitated, caught off guard by the question. No one had ever asked her that before. Her life had always been something that happened to her, not something she chose. "I do not know," she said finally. "Yes, you do. Close your eyes and imagine it. What do you see?" Against her better judgment, Zara closed her eyes. For a moment, there was only darkness, and then slowly an image formed. A small house, somewhere quiet with a barn for treating animals, fields around it and a garden. Work that mattered, work that she was good at. People who respected her, who sought her help because they trusted her skill. And Byron. Byron was there in this imagined life, not as a visitor passing through but as a constant, as someone who belonged. She opened her eyes quickly, heat rising in her cheeks. "It does not matter what I imagine. It is not real, it could be. Byron, I am not talking about legal battles or magistrates, he interrupted. I am talking about the future, about what you want. Because I think you want the same thing I do, Zara, and I think we are both too afraid to say it. Her heart was pounding. What do you want? Byron set the hoof pick aside and turned to face her fully. In the dim light of the stable, his eyes were very green. I want you to come with me. Not as an assistant or an apprentice, but as a partner. I want to teach you everything I know and learn from what you know. I want to build a practice that serves people who cannot afford the fancy veterinarians in the cities, people like the farmers we have been helping. And I want to do it with you. I am indentured, Zara said, her voice barely a whisper. I know. And I know I promised not to push, but Zara, we cannot keep dancing around this. I am in love with you. I have been for months, and I hope that you feel the same way. So I am asking, not as someone trying to save you, but as someone who wants to build a life with you. Will you let me help you fight for your freedom? Not for my sake, but for yours. The world seemed to tilt. Byron was in love with her. He had said it out loud, and now the words hung in the air between them like a challenge. I do, Zara heard herself say. Feel the same way. I am terrified of it, but I do. Byron's face transformed, hope and joy breaking through the careful control he had maintained. Then let me help you. Please. Zara thought about the magistrate, about the risks, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then she thought about the life she had imagined, the one where she was free and skilled and valued, the one where Byron was hers and she was his. All right, she said. We will try. Byron let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was crossing the space between them and pulling her into his arms. Zara went rigid for a moment, unused to being held, and then she melted into him, her face pressed against his shoulder. He smelled of horses and leather and the herbs he used in his medicines, and she thought that she had never felt safer in her life. We will get you out of here, Byron murmured into her hair. I promise. And then we are going to build the life you deserve. Zara did not correct him this time. She just held on and let herself believe. The plan they devised was careful and methodical. Byron would not confront Grendrick directly, which would only put the innkeeper on guard. Instead, he would quietly gather evidence of the debt manipulation, speaking to other workers who had been or were indentured at the crossroads, checking the local records for inconsistencies, documenting the ways Grendrick inflated costs and added fees. It took weeks, and every day Zara lived in fear that Grendrick would discover what they were doing. But Byron was discreet, and the people he spoke to were mostly folk who had their own grievances against the innkeeper. Slowly, a picture emerged of systematic fraud, of contracts that should have been fulfilled years ago but were instead extended indefinitely through creative accounting. Zara, meanwhile, kept her head down and worked, trying not to draw attention. It was harder than it should have been, because knowing that Byron loved her, that there was a future waiting beyond these walls, made the present almost unbearable. She caught herself daydreaming when she should have been focused, and more than once Grendrick cuffed her for inattention. "What is wrong with you lately?" he demanded after she spilled a tray of drinks. "You are more useless than usual." Zara bit back the retort that rose to her lips and simply apologized. But that night, she found Byron in the stable and let him hold her while she shook with anger and frustration. "Soon," he promised. "We are almost ready, just a little longer." The break came from an unexpected source. One of the other indentured workers, a young man named Tam who had been at the crossroads even longer than Zara, approached Byron one evening with a ledger he had stolen from Grendrick's office. "I do not know what you are planning," Tam said, his hands trembling as he held out the book. "But if you are looking for proof that he is a cheat, this is it. I copied down what I owe every month for 2 years, and it never goes down. Sometimes it goes up even when I have not bought anything or broken anything. He is robbing all of us." Byron took the ledger carefully, as though it were made of glass. "This could get you in serious trouble if he finds out. I do not care any more. I am 24 years old, and I have been here since I was 16. I should have worked off my debt 3 times over by now. If you can use this to take him down, do it." Byron looked at Zara, and she nodded. "Do it." The meeting with Magistrate Crane was set for a week later, in the town of Milford. Byron hired a solicitor, a sharp-eyed woman named Iris Fletcher, who reviewed the evidence they had gathered and pronounced it more than sufficient. "Grendrick has been running this scheme for years," she said, tapping the ledger. "He is going to face criminal charges, not just civil penalties, and every contract he holds is going to be voided. How many people are currently indentured to him?" 7, Zara said, "including me." "Then 7 people are about to get their lives back." Iris smiled grimly. "This is the kind of case I live for." On the appointed day, Byron, Zara, Tam, and Iris rode to Milford. Magistrate Crane received them in her office, an austere room lined with law books. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interrupting as Iris presented the evidence, and then she reviewed the documents herself, her expression growing colder and colder. "This is fraud on a massive scale," she said finally, "and it has clearly been going on for years. Why has no one brought this to my attention before now?" "Because the previous magistrate was Grendrick's drinking companion," Byron said bluntly, "and the constable is his cousin." People did not believe they would get a fair hearing. Crane's lips thinned. "I see. Well, they will get one now. I am issuing a warrant for Grendrick's arrest and a writ voiding all indenture contracts he currently holds. Furthermore, I am ordering a full audit of his finances. If he has been stealing from these people, he is going to repay every coin, even if I have to seize his assets to do it." Zara felt her knees go weak. It was real. It was actually happening. Byron's hand found hers under the table, and she gripped it hard enough to hurt. "Thank you," she managed to say. Crane's expression softened slightly. "Thank him." She nodded at Byron. "He is the one who brought this to me, but you are the one who survived it, and that takes strength. I am sorry you had to endure this for so long." They rode back to the crossroads with a deputy magistrate and 2 armed guards. Zara had expected to feel triumphant, but instead she just felt numb, as though her mind could not quite process what was happening. When they arrived, Grendrick was in the common room serving ale to a group of travelers. He looked up as they entered, and his face went from annoyance to confusion to fury in the space of a heartbeat. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. The deputy stepped forward. "Tomas Grendrick, you are under arrest for fraud, contract manipulation, and theft. You will come with us to Milford to answer these charges." Grendrick's face turned purple. "This is outrageous. On whose authority?" Magistrate Helena Crane. The deputy held up the warrant. "And I have a writ here voiding all indenture contracts you currently hold. As of this moment, every person indentured to you is free to go." The common room had gone silent. The other workers, who had been going about their tasks, stood frozen, staring. Marna, the cook, had her hand over her mouth. Peric, the stable hand, looked like he might cry. Grendrick rounded on Zara, his eyes blazing. "You did this. You ungrateful, scheming little wretch. After everything I have done for you, you have done nothing for me but exploit my desperation," Zara said, and her voice was steady and cold. "You cheated me and everyone else here, and now you are going to pay for it." Grendrick lunged for her, but the guards caught him before he could take more than a step. He fought them, shouting obscenities as they dragged him toward the door. The travelers watched in shock, and one of them actually started clapping, which set off a ripple of laughter that followed Grendrick out into the yard. When he was gone, the deputy turned to the assembled workers. "You are all free. The magistrate will see that you receive compensation for the wages you were cheated out of, though it may take time to calculate. In the meantime, you may stay here or go as you please. The station will be placed under temporary management until its future is determined." Tam let out a whoop and hugged the nearest person, who happened to be Marna. She laughed and hugged him back, and then everyone was talking at once, a babble of shock and relief and disbelief. Zara stood in the middle of it all, feeling as though she were watching from a great distance. Byron touched her shoulder gently. "Are you all right?" he asked. She turned to look at him, this man who had seen her when no one else did, who had believed in her when she could not believe in herself. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I think I am free, but I do not know what that means yet." "It means you get to decide what comes next." Byron's smile was soft and hopeful. "So what do you want to do, Zara Vex?" Zara thought about the life she had imagined, the one with the small house and the barn and the work that mattered. The one with Byron in it, not as a visitor but as a partner. "I want to go with you," she said. "If the offer is still open, it will always be open." Byron took her hands in his, right there in the middle of the common room with everyone watching. "I love you, Zara. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing that you are beside me, and that we are doing work that matters. I want to grow old with you and argue about the best way to treat colic and teach the next generation everything we know, if you will have me." Zara felt tears spill over, but for the first time in years they were not tears of grief or frustration. They were tears of joy, pure and uncomplicated. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will have you." Byron kissed her then, a soft, sweet kiss that tasted of promises and new beginnings, and around them, the people who had been her fellow prisoners started cheering. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The magistrate's audit revealed that Grendrick had stolen thousands of silver marks over the years, and every person he had defrauded was entitled to compensation. Zara received a sum that made her gasp when Iris Fletcher presented it to her, enough to buy a small farm if she wanted, or to invest in a business. But she and Byron had other plans. They found a piece of land halfway between Milford and the crossroads, a modest plot with a house that needed work and a barn that needed even more. It was perfect. "We can use the house for treating small animals," Byron said, walking through the empty rooms with the kind of enthusiasm Zara found both endearing and infectious. "And the barn for larger livestock. We will need to build an examination room and a surgery and a place to keep supplies. And living quarters, of course. Upstairs would work for that." "It is a lot of work," Zara said, but she was smiling. "We have time, and we have help." The help came from unexpected places. The farmers they had treated over the months heard about their plans and showed up with tools and materials, eager to contribute to a practice that would serve them. Tam, who turned out to be a skilled carpenter, offered to oversee the construction. Marna, who had decided she was too old to start over somewhere new, agreed to cook for them in exchange for a small cottage on the property. Slowly, the house and barn were transformed. Byron taught Zara the finer points of veterinary surgery, and she taught him the herb lore her mother had passed down, the knowledge of poultices and tinctures that had been nearly forgotten. They worked side by side, and in the evenings, they sat on the porch of their half-finished home and talked about the future. "You ever regret it?" Byron asked one night. "Staying here in the borderlands, instead of going to a city where you could train formally?" Zara leaned against him, his arm warm around her shoulders. "No, This is where I belong. These people are my people. And besides, I have you. Why would I want to be anywhere else? I love you, Byron said, not for the first time and not for the last. I love you too, Zara replied, and meant it with her whole heart. They were married in the autumn, a year to the day after Byron had first told her she deserved a better life. The ceremony was small, held in the yard of their now completed practice, with the farmers and townsfolk they had helped in attendance. Magistrate Crane officiated, looking far more relaxed than she had in her austere office, and Iris Fletcher served as a witness. Zara wore a simple dress in deep blue, and Byron wore his best coat, and when they exchanged vows, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. I promise to stand beside you, Byron said, his voice steady, in all the work we do and all the life we build. I promise to trust your skill and your judgment, to learn from you as I hope you learn from me. I promise to love you, not as someone who needs saving, but as someone who has saved herself and chosen to share her life with me. Zara's vows were simpler. I promise to believe you when you tell me I deserve good things. I promise to fight for the life we are building every day with everything I have. And I promise to love you, now and always. They kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers, and Zara thought that if someone had told her a year ago that this was where she would be, she would never have believed them. But here she was, free and loved and building a life on her own terms. The practice thrived. Word spread of the orc woman and the human man who could heal any animal, who charged fair prices and never turned anyone away. They treated everything from colic to broken bones to difficult births, and slowly, Zara's skills grew to match, and then exceed Byron's in certain areas. She had a gift for surgery, a steadiness of hand that made her the better choice for delicate procedures, and Byron was happy to defer to her expertise. They took on apprentices, young people from the borderlands who wanted to learn the trade. Zara taught them with the same patience Byron had shown her, and she found that she loved teaching almost as much as she loved healing. Watching someone's face light up when they successfully treated their first patient, seeing them grow in confidence and skill, was a joy she had not anticipated. One spring evening, nearly 2 years after they had married, Zara and Byron were sitting on their porch, watching the sun set over the fields they had planted. The apprentices had gone home for the day, and the barn was quiet. "I have been thinking," Zara said, leaning her head on Byron's shoulder. About expanding. We have more work than we can handle, and there are communities further out that have no access to veterinary care at all. What if we trained more people, created a network of practices across the borderlands? Byron was quiet for a moment, and then he laughed, a deep, delighted sound. "You are brilliant. We could establish standards, share knowledge, make sure that everyone has access to care. It would take years, but we could change the entire region. We would need funding. And support from the magistrates. We will get it. I know we will." Byron kissed the top of her head. "You have come so far, Zara. Do you realize that? From a girl who could not imagine a future beyond survival to a woman who is planning to change the world." Zara smiled. "I had help. You did the hardest part yourself. I just reminded you of what you were capable of." She thought about that, about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. The girl who had not believed she deserved anything had grown into a woman who knew her own worth, who built her life with her own hands and fought for what she believed in. "I believe you now," she said softly. "Believe what?" "That I deserve a better life. I finally believe it." Byron's arms tightened around her. "Good. Because you do, Zara. You always did." They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise, and Zara knew that whatever challenges came, they would face them together. She was free. She was loved. She was home, and she deserved every bit of it.